I wasn't sold to enemies. I was given to family. The room smelled like disinfectant and old metal, the kind of sterile air that scrubs emotions out of a space and leaves only decisions behind. Glass walls. Steel table. No windows. The clan liked its negotiations clean and quiet, like surgeries. I sat with my hands folded in front of me, fingers locked tight enough to hurt. If I let go, they'd shake. I hated that. Omegas were expected to shake. I'd spent years training myself not to. Across the table, my mother sat perfectly straight, spine aligned, chin lifted. She wore her formal face, the one she used for funerals, hearings, and sacrifices that needed to look reasonable. Her hair was pinned back too tightly, as if softness itself were a liability. To her right sat the clan lawyer. No scent. No presence. Just a man in a gray suit with a tablet and a stack of digital seals ready to be applied. He hadn't said my name once. That should have been my first clue. This is a protective arrangement, my mother said calmly. Temporary. Structured. I snorted before I could stop myself. You're really going with protective? Her gaze flicked to me, sharp and warning. Miles. That was my second clue. She only used my full name when she'd already decided something and didn't want interference from emotions. The lawyer finally spoke, his voice flat. Your brother's sentencing hearing is in 48 hours. There it was. I leaned back in my chair, metal cold against my spine. Ah, so this is about him? Silence stretched. My mother didn't deny it. My brother. Firstborn, alpha, pride of the family. The one who made mistakes that somehow became everyone else's problem. The one currently sitting in a detention facility for assaulting a city official during a raid gone wrong. An alpha mistake. An omega solution. If the contract is accepted, the lawyer continued, tapping his tablet, all charges against your brother will be reconsidered. Dropped, I corrected.
If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting.
He inclined his head slightly. Resolved? I laughed. It came out sharp and humorless. You're trading me for him. No, my mother said immediately. Too quickly. We're ensuring the survival of this family. I looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even conflicted. She was relieved. The realization hit harder than any blow. Not because she was doing this, but because she'd already made peace with it. What kind of contract? I asked. The lawyer slid the tablet toward me. The screen lit up with legal text, dense and unforgiving. My eyes skimmed automatically. I was trained to read fast, to find traps. Temporary subordination, operational deployment, full obedience in mission parameters, ownership. My throat tightened. And the buyer? The door behind me opened. The scent hit first. Alpha, unmistakable, controlled to a razor's edge. Not aggressive, not invasive. Just there, heavy, like gravity deciding to acknowledge you. I didn't turn right away. I didn't need to. Killian Voss, the lawyer said, standing halfway, head of Metropolitan Security, legend, executioner. The man whose name made criminals bargain before he even arrived. I finally looked. He stood just inside the room, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark operational gear instead of a suit. His expression was neutral, eyes sharp and assessing. Not hungry, not pleased. He didn't look at me like a prize. He looked at me like a variable. I won't pressure him, Voss said calmly. His voice was low, steady. The signature has to be voluntary. My mother exhaled, almost imperceptibly. I met his gaze and felt my instincts recoil, then brace. You're buying an Omega Scout, I said. The cheapest kind. I'm acquiring an asset, he replied. That happens to be very good at staying alive. That surprised me. He didn't step closer, didn't speak again. He simply waited. That was worse. I looked down at the tablet. At the glowing line where my signature would go. At the future being quietly rearranged without my consent, except technically with it. I raised my eyes to my mother. She held my gaze. Didn't beg. Didn't apologize. You're strong, she said softly. You'll endure this. And your brother will live. Something in my chest went very still. I picked up the tablet. My hand didn't shake. I hope, I said quietly, signing my name. He's worth it. The seal flashed. The contract locked. Behind me, Killian Voss let out a slow breath. And just like that, I stopped being someone's son. And became someone's solution. The headquarters of Metropolitan Security didn't bother pretending to be welcoming. Steel, glass, white light that made everyone look tired and guilty by default. Armed guards at every checkpoint. Elevators that didn't have buttons. Just scanners that decided whether you were allowed to go up or not. I followed Killian Voss through it all, my steps echoing half a second behind his. Not because I was trying to be obedient. Because the contract had already sunk its teeth in. Subtle and efficient. No one touched me. No one leered. No one whispered. That almost bothered me more. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing us inside a narrow box of humming silence. Voss stood facing forward, hands clasped behind his back. Professional. Distant. Like I wasn't a person, just a file that walked. I waited for it. The warning. The threat. The reminder of who owned whom. It didn't come. You're cleared for restricted floors, he said instead. Eyes still on the numbers scrolling upward. Within mission parameters. I blinked. Wow. No collar? No speech about obedience? A corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. I don't waste time on theatrics, he said. Or fear-based compliance. Good, I replied. I'm allergic to humiliation. He glanced at me then briefly. Assessing. That won't be necessary. The doors opened onto a floor that looked more like a surgical wing than an operations center. Screens embedded in walls. Tactical maps. People moving with purpose, all sharp edges and quiet voices. This was where power lived. Not loudly, but permanently. A man leaned against a console nearby, arms crossed, watching us approach. Beta, if I had to guess. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes that measured everything like it might be a joke waiting to happen. This the package? He asked. I smiled sweetly. Asset, I corrected. Apparently, he snorted. Figures. Voss didn't react. Deputy Commander Hale, he said to me. This is Miles. Hale raised an eyebrow. That's it? No rank? No call sign? Not yet. Voss said. I glanced between them. I feel like I should be offended. You should, Hale said easily. But don't worry. He doesn't do sentimental. I noticed. Voss stopped at a glass-walled office and gestured me inside. The door sealed behind us with a quiet hiss. The room was minimal. Desk. Screen. No personal items. No family photos. Nothing that suggested Killian Voss existed outside this building. He activated the screen, pulling up the contract. Operational terms, he said. You'll be deployed as reconnaissance, infiltration, and support. You are not front line unless necessary. Let me guess, I said. I'm necessary a lot. Only when you volunteer, he replied calmly. That caught me off guard. I stared at him. Excuse me? You have the right to refuse missions outside contract scope, he said. You won't be punished for it. I laughed under my breath. That's generous. For ownership. His gaze sharpened. You are not my property. I tilted my head. Funny. The contract disagrees. The contract defines your function, he said. Not your worth. Silence settled between us, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, I asked, so what am I then? He looked at the screen, then back at me. An operational asset, he said. Highly skilled, expendable only if mishandled. That was it. No cruelty, no reassurance. Just efficiency. And somehow, that scared me more than if he'd threatened to break me. Because indifference doesn't bruise. It erases. The rain made everything honest. It washed the colors out of the industrial sector, until the world became steel, shadow, and movement. Broken streetlights flickered like they were nervous. The abandoned warehouses hunched along the road, all rust and bad intentions. I crouched on the edge of a rooftop, rain sliding down my jacket, comms humming softly in my ear. Miles. Voss's voice came through the channel. Calm. Clear. Confirm visual. I peered through my scope, adjusting for the downpour. 3 armed contacts at the south entrance. 2 patrols rotating every 90 seconds. No cameras on the west side. Copy. Of course they sent me first. I'd known they would. Omegas from poor clans didn't get backup. They got opportunity. The kind that came with a statistical risk no one else wanted. I smiled to myself, teeth tight. Well, if I was the expendable one, I'd make it inconvenient. I slipped down from the roof, boots barely making a sound as I hit the fire escape. My pulse stayed steady. Training kicked in. Muscle memory and instinct braided together until fear became background noise. Moving in, I murmured. The lock on the side door surrendered to my tools with a soft click. Inside, the air smelled like oil and damp concrete. I slid along the wall, counting steps, mapping shadows. 2 guards passed within arm's length of me. I held my breath, then exhaled slowly as they moved on. In my ear, the channel stayed quiet. Voss didn't micromanage. He watched. That knowledge pressed against me. Not his alpha presence, but his attention. It was oddly grounding. I reached the central corridor and paused, crouched behind a stack of crates. Clear path for breach, I whispered. Marking positions now. Data flowed from my wrist display to command. Targets lit up like polite little dots on the tactical map. I allowed myself a tiny grin. You're welcome. The shudder of controlled explosions echoed seconds later. The assault team moved in fast and clean. I stayed out of their way, slipping back into the rain like a ghost who'd already done his part. Mission complete. I exhaled, tension draining out of me all at once. My hands shook then, not from fear, but from the delayed impact of knowing how easily it could have gone wrong. Return to rally point, Voss ordered. Yes, sir. I found him near an armored vehicle. Rain streaking down his coat. The chaos around us faded into background noise as he turned his attention fully to me. You were efficient, he said. That was it. No good job. No praise. No relief that I'd come back in one piece. Just assessment. I shrugged, forcing lightness into my voice. I try not to embarrass my owner. His jaw tightened. Don't say that. Why? I asked. Is it inaccurate? He studied me for a long moment, rain beating on his lashes. You completed your objective without alerting secondary targets, he said. You reduced risk to the team. I waited. And I prompted. And that's what matters, he finished. Something settled in my chest. Heavy, uncomfortable. They didn't throw me in front because they hated me. They did it because I was good at it. Because I'd survive. Probably. As we moved out, I glanced back at the darkened warehouse. I wasn't disposable. But I wasn't protected either. I was valuable. And that meant I'd always be sent first. The second operation didn't wait for daylight or recovery. It dropped us straight into the city's underbelly again. Only this time the stakes were louder. Not abandoned warehouses, but a half-functioning transit hub slated for demolition. Crawling with armed smugglers who knew exactly what they were guarding. I was in the back seat of the armored vehicle, rainwater drying on my sleeves. City lights sliding past the tinted windows like distant constellations. Sirens wailed somewhere far away. The city never slept, it just pretended not to notice. Killian sat across from me. Too close. The moment the vehicle sealed shut, his alpha presence filled the space. Not aggressively, not deliberately, but like heat from a running engine. Controlled, dense, unavoidable. My instincts bristled. I rolled my shoulders, jaw tightening. Nope, don't do this now. Problem? He asked, eyes forward. I scoffed. Just thrilled to be alive. Again. Lie better, he replied calmly. I shot him a look. You ever consider warning an Omega before turning a vehicle into a mobile dominance test? That got his attention. His gaze flicked to me, sharp, but not offended. You're reacting. I noticed, I snapped. My body's very observant. For a heartbeat, the air between us felt tight, charged. Not sexual. Not gentle. Just raw biology grinding against discipline. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled back. Not physically, but intentionally. His presence eased, dialed down with practiced precision. Like someone lowering their voice in a crowded room. The relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. Better? He asked. I swallowed. Don't let it go to your head. A corner of his mouth twitched. Too late. The operation went sideways fast. Shots. Shouting. A wrong turn that wasn't on any map. I slipped through a service corridor ahead of the main team, heart pounding, comms crackling in my ear. Multiple contacts rerouting, I hissed. This wasn't in the briefing. I see it, Killian replied instantly. Fall back. I can clear. Miles. His voice cut through mine. Fall back. I hesitated. 1 second too long. A door exploded inward. I moved on instinct, ducking, rolling, firing a stun round. But there were more of them than expected. Too many. Then Killian was there. Not behind me. Not covering from a distance. There. He stepped into my line like a wall, returning fire with lethal efficiency. Positioning himself between me and incoming rounds without hesitation. Protocol violation, I muttered breathlessly. Shut up and move, he ordered. We moved as one, backs aligned, covering each other without looking. I knew where he'd be. He knew where I'd go. It wasn't command. It was choice. We made it out with scraped armor and ringing ears, but alive. Back in the vehicle, adrenaline still buzzing, I laughed, short, incredulous. You're aware you just broke about 6 regulations? Yes, he said calmly. Because... I pressed. He met my gaze then, steady and unapologetic. You were in danger. Something in my chest shifted. Not melted. Not softened. Aligned. I looked away, staring out at the city again. Careful, Voss. People might think you're attached. He huffed quietly. Don't flatter yourself. But the city lights blurred a little anyway. For the first time since the contract sealed, I didn't feel like a tool being wielded. I felt like someone had stepped in front of the blade with me in mind. And that difference, that choice, changed everything. The house hadn't changed. Same narrow hallway. Same low ceiling that made tall people hunch their shoulders. Same smell of old wood, cleaning solution, and memories that never quite aired out. I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, hand resting on the frame like it might steady me. The place felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown bones that no longer fit inside it. My brother sat at the kitchen table. Free. No cuffs. No guards. No jumpsuit. Just his broad alpha shoulders crammed into a chair meant for cheaper bodies. He was alive. Breathing. Whole. And he couldn't look at me. Hey, I said lightly, because sarcasm had always been my safest weapon. He flinched. That hurt more than if he'd glared. You, he started, then stopped. His gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. You look different. I almost laughed. Purchase tends to do that. My mother moved between us, efficient as ever. She set a mug on the counter, hands steady. He's still recovering, she said. The holding facility was unpleasant. I nodded. I imagine it was. My brother finally glanced at me, just for a second. Guilt flashed across his face like a bruise. Then it vanished, replaced by something easier. Relief. I didn't ask for this, he said quickly. I swear. I didn't know it would be you. Of course he hadn't asked. That didn't mean he'd refused. I know, I said. And I did. That was the problem. My mother turned to face me, folding her hands like this was another negotiation. Miles, we didn't have time. The charges were severe, the clan's reputation was in danger, I finished. I know the speech. Her eyes hardened slightly. You've always been strong. There it was. The phrase she'd used when my father died. When food was short. When someone needed to bend without breaking. You're strong, she repeated gently. You'll endure this. And your brother will live. I looked at her and felt something inside me finally go quiet. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Understanding. This wasn't cruelty. It was efficiency. I turned back to my brother. He stared at his hands now, shoulders hunched, scent muted. I'll make it up to you, he said. I swear, I'll work. I'll pay the clan back. I smiled. It was a thin thing. You don't owe the clan, I said. You owe yourself. He looked up then, confused. I stepped back, already heading for the door. Miles, my mother called. Not sharply. Almost. Uncertain. I paused, but didn't turn. I did what I had to do, she said. I nodded once. So did I. Outside, the air felt colder, cleaner, like breathing for the first time after a long dive. As I walked away from the house, it hit me with a clarity that hurt worse than anger ever could. They hadn't hated me. They hadn't wanted to hurt me. They'd just found it easier to give me up than to lose him. And that kind of betrayal, the quiet, reasonable kind, was the hardest to forgive. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the gunfire. It was silence. We were mid-operation, routine sweep, controlled perimeter, nothing flashy. I was running remote access from a secondary node, fingers moving automatically as data streamed across my screen. Closed channels. Archived logs. Old infrastructure, no one bothered cleaning because it was supposed to be dead. Supposed to be. Miles. A voice crackled in my ear. Hale, tense. We've got a delay on the West team. Feed's lagging. I see it, I muttered, already rerouting. That's not interference. That's intentional. I slowed, instincts prickling. Someone had threaded a false signal through the network. Old school, careful, expensive. The kind of work that required authority and time. The kind of work no street syndicate could pull off. I dug deeper, bypassing layers that should have been locked forever. My pulse stayed calm, but my spine went cold as names began to surface. Shell departments. Phantom budgets. And then, I saw it. A familiar string buried in a 30-year-old authorization chain. Voss. Not a first name. A family marker. I froze. No. I whispered. That's not... Miles? Killian's voice cut in. Sharp now. Report. I swallowed, forcing my hands to keep moving. There's legacy routing here. Old command overrides. Someone rebuilt part of the system using pre-reform security codes. Whose? He asked. I hesitated for half a second. Then, I sent the file. The channel went dead quiet. Seconds stretched. Too many of them. Killian? I said softly. When he spoke again, his voice was still controlled, but only just. Like steel under strain. Where did you find this? In the archives. Buried under disaster response authorizations from before your tenure. Before he was in charge. Before he could have stopped it. I didn't know, he said. Not to me. To himself. I leaned back against the cold server wall, heart pounding. Someone's been using your family's credentials as a shield. This goes back decades. Another pause. Then, just for a moment, the alpha pressure spiked through the channel. Raw. Unfiltered. It hit me like a sudden drop in altitude. Sharp enough to steal my breath. I hissed, bracing myself. Sorry, Killian said immediately. The pressure vanished as quickly as it had come. It was the first time I'd ever heard him apologize. I didn't mean... He stopped, then exhaled slowly. You're right. This wasn't an accident. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. The operation resumed around me, but the world felt off-kilter, like I'd nudged something foundational out of place. You should pull back, Killian said. Now. I can still trace. That's an order, he cut in. Then, quieter, please. That word landed heavier than any command. I shut down the access and moved, slipping out of the archive corridors with my head buzzing and my chest tight. Killian Voss had always seemed untouchable. Solid. Certain. Now I knew better. Truth didn't care how powerful you were. It cracked foundations. It exposed bones. And even legends. Especially legends. Could break under its weight. Killian's office was quieter than the rest of headquarters. No hum of machinery. No distant chatter. Just glass, steel, and the city stretched out behind him like something already conquered. Night pressed against the windows, lights flickering far below. I didn't sit. I want the truth, I said. All of it. Killian stood behind his desk, hands flat against the surface, shoulders rigid. He didn't tell me to calm down. Didn't tell me to leave. That was how I knew this wasn't going to be easy. You saw the files, he said finally. I saw your family name stitched into a system that kills people quietly, I shot back. I saw decades of access no one should still have. And I want to know why I'm suddenly very convenient. Silence. Then he nodded once. My father, he said. And his father before him. They helped design the early security framework for the city. Oversight was looser then. That's not an answer. They believed stability justified secrecy, he continued, voice flat. They buried fail-safes, shadow routes, ways to control outcomes if the city ever lost its way. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Let me guess. It lost its way. Yes. And you? I asked. Where do you fit in? His jaw tightened. Cleaning up their mess. I stepped closer. And me? That stopped him. Killian looked at me then. Not like an asset, not like an operative. Like someone he'd failed to protect. Your contract, he said slowly, was proposed by people who knew what you were capable of. An Omega, with your skill set, your access profile. You were a perfect insertion point. My hands curled into fists. So, I was bait. No, he said immediately. You were leverage. That hurt more than bait ever could. They assumed I wouldn't refuse, he continued. That I'd see it as acceptable collateral. And did you? I asked quietly. He held my gaze. At first, yes. The honesty hit harder than any lie. But that changed, he added. The moment I saw the full scope, the moment I realized they'd already decided your life was negotiable, I took a breath that shook despite my best efforts. You still signed the contract? Yes. You still own it? Yes. I swallowed. Then tell me why I'm still here. Killian reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a slim data pad. He set it between us and pushed it forward. A termination clause, he said. Effective immediately. If you want it. I stared at the screen. No tricks. No fine print. Just an exit. You're giving me a choice, I said slowly. I should've from the start. I laughed softly, rubbing my thumb against the edge of the pad. You know what happens if I leave. Your investigation loses its sharpest knife. Yes. And if I stay? His voice dropped. You stay because you choose to. Not because you're owned. Not because someone decided you were expendable. I looked up at him. Really looked. At the exhaustion in his eyes. The control held together by discipline and guilt. The man standing in a room built for power, offering me mine back. Choice. I slid the pad back toward him. I stay, I said. Not because I was loyal. Not because I was afraid. But because for the first time in my life, someone had handed me the leash. And trusted me to decide whether to wear it. And that was power. The city burned quietly that night. No sirens. No headlines yet. Just movement, too much of it, hidden under layers of protocol and polite lies. The kind of night where everything that had been buried finally decided to claw its way back to the surface. We were deployed under false orders. I knew it the moment I saw the op code. This isn't ours, I said into the channel, fingers flying over my wrist display as we moved through the loading bay. Authorization chain doesn't match security command. Confirmed. Hale replied grimly. We've got internal overrides. Someone rerouted half the teams. Killian didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was cold steel. All units, switch to Shadow Channel. Effective now. That alone was treason. The facility loomed ahead of us. An old municipal hub repurposed, fortified from the inside. Lights flickered behind reinforced glass. Armed silhouettes moved where they shouldn't have been. This is it, I muttered. The spine of it. Gunfire erupted before anyone could pretend we were ready. Everything broke loose at once. Explosions tearing through barriers, shouts overlapping, commands, boots pounding metal floors slick with water and blood. My world narrowed to angles and timing, breath and movement. Miles. East corridors collapsing, Killian warned. I see it, I snapped, ducking as debris rained down. Taking alternate route. Negative. Pull back. I can still. A shot rang out, too close. I moved without thinking, diving behind a pillar, as return fire sparked against concrete. My pulse roared in my ears. This was the edge, where skill blurred into instinct and instinct into something sharper. Something shared. Behind you, Killian said. I spun, trusting the warning without seeing him. A stun round took the attacker down where my blind spot had been. We moved together after that. Not him commanding and me obeying, but shifting, adjusting, covering each other's gaps like we'd trained for this exact moment. Like the bond between us had snapped into place under pressure. Internal betrayal confirmed, Hale barked over comms. Commands compromised. They're trying to bury this op. Let them try, Killian growled. Miles, the archive core is 2 levels down. Can you get me proof? I didn't hesitate. Already on it. I slipped through a maintenance shaft, body aching, lungs burning. My hands shook as I jacked into the core, data flooding my vision. Names. Orders. Long chains of quiet deaths justified as necessity. And there it was, the spine. The conspiracy laid bare. Footsteps thundered nearby. Miles, move, Killian shouted. Too late. I ripped the data free and turned just as the corridor exploded inward. The force slammed me into the wall, breath torn from my lungs. Pain flared white-hot down my side. I hit the floor hard, vision blurring. Then Killian was there. He took a hit meant for me, armor screaming in protest as rounds struck him. He fired back with brutal efficiency, positioning himself over me like a shield. Get up, he ordered, voice raw now. That's not a request. I thought you liked protocol, I gasped, pushing myself up. Not tonight. He hauled me to my feet and we ran. Through smoke, through chaos, through a system devouring itself from the inside. Orders screamed over open channels contradicted each other. Units collided. Trust collapsed. But between us, it held. We burst into the open as extraction fire lit the night sky. The last barrier fell behind us, sealing the truth inside systems that could no longer deny it. Back in the transport, hands shaking, blood drying on my sleeve, I laughed, a short, breathless sound. You know, I said, you violated about a dozen direct commands. Killian leaned back, eyes closing for just a second. I'll survive the reprimand. I looked at him, really looked. He was bleeding. Exhausted. Still here. You chose me, I said quietly. He opened his eyes, met my gaze. No deflection. No excuses. Yes. The transport lifted, city falling away beneath us. The conspiracy was exposed. The system was burning. Consequences would come. But in the wreckage, one thing had held fast. Trust. Tested by fire. And proven unbreakable. The medical block smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. White lights hummed softly overhead, less harsh than the ones in interrogation rooms, but no kinder. My body finally remembered it had been hurt. Adrenaline drained out of me in a slow, unforgiving wave, leaving behind shaking hands and a deep, bone-heavy fatigue. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling while a medic patched my side and muttered about lucky angles and don't do that again. I nodded along like I had any intention of listening. The curtain rustled. Killian stepped in, jacket gone, sleeves rolled up. There was a dark smear of blood along his forearm, mostly not his. He looked tired in a way that went past physical exhaustion and settled somewhere deeper. The medic took one look at him and sighed. 5 minutes. When we were alone, the silence settled gently between us. Not awkward, not strained, just quiet. You're terrible at following orders, Killian said at last. I huffed weakly. Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you. He moved closer, stopping just short of the bed. Deliberate, careful, like he was aware of exactly how much space he was taking. You could have been killed, he said. So could you, I shot back. You jumped in front of live fire. That's not exactly a leadership seminar. His mouth twitched. I'll update the handbook. I shifted, wincing. Please include a section on reckless alphas with hero complexes. He studied me for a moment, then shook his head. You know why I did it? I did. Still, hearing it mattered. You're not expendable, he said quietly. You never were. And you're not mine? I raised an eyebrow. You're giving up ownership already? That was fast. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. I never wanted it. I swallowed, throat suddenly tight. You could have kept the contract. No one would have blamed you. I would have, he replied. The weight of that settled slowly, carefully, like something fragile being placed where it belonged. I broke the silence first. So, any chance the city collapses overnight? Unlikely, he said dryly. Though several powerful people will be very uncomfortable tomorrow. Good, I murmured. Discomfort builds character. He let out a quiet laugh, barely more than a breath. You're impossible. Occupational hazard. The medic cleared his throat outside the curtain. Time was up. Killian straightened, then paused. When you're discharged, he said, we should talk. About what comes next? I nodded. As long as it's not another contract. He met my gaze, steady and open. No contracts. After he left, I lay back against the pillow, a strange warmth settling beneath the fatigue. No pressure, no command, just the quiet understanding that I was still here. And that for once, I hadn't been kept by force. I went back alone. No escort, no security detail. Just me, standing in front of the same narrow house with its tired walls and overgrown hedges. The city hummed somewhere behind me, alive and indifferent. The door opened before I knocked. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was finally seeing her without the weight of obligation warping the edges. You're better, she said, eyes scanning me automatically. Checking for damage. For cost. I'm alive, I replied. That's usually the metric. She stepped aside. I didn't go far, just inside the doorway. Close enough to leave without hesitation. My brother hovered in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with nothing. When he saw me, his shoulders stiffened. I heard about the operation, he said quickly. They said it was bad. That people died. They did, I said. Calm. Honest. Not me. He swallowed. I never wanted you hurt. I know. That seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. My mother folded her arms. You didn't have to come. Yes, I said softly. I did. Silence stretched. Thick, but not hostile. I'm leaving, I said. For good. Her breath caught, not sharply, but enough to register. You have obligations here. I shook my head. No. I had expectations. There's a difference. My brother stepped forward. I'll make it right, he said. I'll pay you back. You can't, I interrupted gently. And I don't want you to. He frowned, confused. Why not? Because this isn't a debt, I said. It's a choice. And it was already made. My mother's voice was steady, but there was something brittle underneath it. We did what we had to. I know, I replied. That's why I'm not angry. Her eyes searched my face, as if anger would have been easier to deal with. But understanding isn't forgiveness, I continued. And love that only works when I'm useful, isn't love I can live inside anymore. She closed her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them, she nodded once. You're strong. I almost smiled. I don't need to be, I said. I stepped back, hand finding the doorframe again. The same gesture as before, but lighter now. My brother spoke my name, desperation creeping into his voice. Miles, wait. I shook my head. Take care of yourself. And then, I left. The door closed behind me with a final solid click. Walking away didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like healing. It felt like clarity. And sometimes, that was enough. The contract ended quietly. No ceremony. No witnesses. Just a line of code dissolving on a secure screen in Killian's office, while the city breathed beyond the glass walls. Morning light painted the skyline in pale gold, softening edges that usually cut. I watched the confirmation blink once, then disappear. That's it? I asked. No fireworks? Killian glanced at me. You're welcome to imagine them. I'll try not to be offended by how underwhelming my emancipation is. A faint smile curved his mouth. Real, this time. Unforced. You're free, he said. Effective immediately. The word landed gently, but it stayed. Free. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My shoulders loosened. Something in my chest settled, like a piece finally clicking into place. Killian stepped back from the console, giving me space. Always space. There's no obligation to remain here, he said. No expectations. No leverage. I raised an eyebrow. You rehearsed that. I wanted to get it right. The city moved below us, traffic threading through streets, people hurrying toward lives they'd chosen or stumbled into. 1,000 invisible stories continuing without us. If I stay, I said slowly, it's not as an asset. No, he agreed. As a partner. And the pack? I asked, unable to keep the note of tension out of my voice. That, he said quietly, would be yours to define. I studied him for a long moment. This man had power enough to cage me and discipline enough not to. He'd broken rules, burned bridges, and stood in front of bullets without hesitation. Not because he owned me. Because he chose me. I exhaled, then laughed softly. You know, for someone who hates contracts, you're terrible at selling freedom. I'm not selling, he said. I'm offering. I stepped closer, not crossing into his space, just closing the distance enough to be intentional. I stay, I said. On my terms. His gaze sharpened, then softened. Of course. Also, I added, if anyone calls me operational asset again, I reserve the right to be unpleasant. He huffed. Duly noted. Later, standing on the roof as the city stretched endlessly in every direction, I felt it settle. Not ownership. Not obligation. Belonging. A pack wasn't a chain. It wasn't blood or contracts or expectations carved into bone. It was a choice. And as Killian stood beside me, close, but not confining, I realized something simple and quietly revolutionary. Home wasn't where you were kept. It was where you were wanted. Time softened the sharpest edges. Not by erasing them, but by teaching me where not to press. The city looked different from this height. Calmer. Or maybe I was. The rooftop was quiet, wind tugging gently at my jacket, carrying the distant hum of traffic and life moving forward without urgency. I'd built a rhythm here. Work that challenged me without consuming me. A place in operations where my voice mattered. People who waited for me to come back. Not because they owned the right, but because they wanted to know I was safe. Killian stood a few steps away, speaking quietly with Hale. His posture relaxed in a way I never would have believed possible months ago. When he caught me watching, he lifted a brow in silent question. I shook my head. Nothing. Everything, really. I thought about the contract sometimes. About the sterile room. The tablet glowing beneath my fingers. The moment my life had been reduced to a line item someone else could justify. It didn't hurt the way it used to. That chapter of my life hadn't disappeared. But it no longer defined me. I wasn't someone's solution anymore. I wasn't a sacrifice dressed up as reason. I was an omega who chose where to stand. Who to trust. Who to come home to. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest trace of alpha scent, steady, familiar, never pressing. A presence, not a claim. I smiled. Family wasn't blood. It wasn't obligation. It wasn't who handed you over and told themselves it was love. It was who stayed when you had every right to walk away. I took one last look at the city, then turned back toward the life I'd chosen. I was given away to save him. But, in the end, I saved myself.